Go. I see. Hello. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Yes. I wonder, do you think I was thinking about I've not done a live Zoom event. I've been pretty uninterested not that there have been not that the crowds have been clamoring for me to do events, but this is the first one that I've done. And I was thinking that it reminded me of something that a friend said about radio, that it's sort of the ideal, that you can imagine the ideal audience because anybody who's there really wants to be there because it's so easy to not be there. Yeah. But so when I sent out an email to a few friends saying that I was going to be doing this if they wanted to tune in. And I think what I'd said was that the reasons that I said yes, one is just that I'm such a fan of your work. And when I say your work, it's your writing, because I've never been in the audience for one of your collaborative or solo productions. And so that, of course, is the main thing. And that was lovely, just a chance to get to talk to you. But then it was also that it seems fitting because I've never met you. Like you, I really feel that I have a problematic relationship to social media and the internet in terms of addictive qualities in a way that I don't have with, cigarettes or drugs or anything. Alcohol is... I lived in New York for a long time. So that there was something lovely about, or interesting maybe, about having this conversation with somebody I've never actually been in an unmediated space in.
Yeah, it's with the brave new world of pandemic Zoom discussions and art and performances. I'm really having trouble getting my mind around it.
Yeah.
But, and yes, it's also, so much of what we've tried to do in performance is do something very live and have this feeling of like we're all together in the same room. And of course, I feel you can't get that at all on Zoom, but also there is a kind of intimacy, and you're in your home, or I'm not in my home right now, I'm at the PME office, but there is something strangely intimate about like talking into your computer, which, for most of us, our computers and our phones are as much a part of our lives as other people.
Yeah.
So it does also have this strain, trying to get something intimate in a performance, in a live performance, is a kind of paradox that I've always been interested in, but also trying to get something intimate online is also a kind of paradox that has a lot of similarities and differences.
Right. And it also, one of the things that I've been thinking about in this last few months is how it didn't even seem to be a conversation, and at least with the people I was talking to, about whether we were going to be in touch over phone or video. Phone wasn't even considered. It's really like this is the format that we've all agreed on without somehow agreeing on it, which I think is, I don't know, it made me think of something that in the book, which I read this past week, which is great. At one point you talked about, what are the unspoken rules of theater, and you'd said, this is on page 178 and 79, you'd said, freedom without rules is simply a freedom that refuses to acknowledge whatever unspoken rules might be present. And then I was thinking, what are the unspoken rules of Zoom? Or are there, what would give us more freedom? I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about another thing you said about how so much of what happens on stage and in live art it's so vulnerable, making that often the conditions we set up around ourselves are the things that will make us be less vulnerable. And so that's that you rehearse and that you know exactly what's going to happen, and that there is this fourth wall. And so then also thinking about what are the conditions that we impose on ourselves for these talks to make ourselves less vulnerable. I mean, for example, people can't comment live, so that we're in a very controlled situation in that sense. So yeah, those things are in my head.
I mean, when you said telephone, I remembered, growing up before the internet, and how much people would talk about how much they loved talking on the telephone, and how, or I would read it in books, like that people loved talking on the telephone and they found it even more intimate than being together with their friends, because it was just like this voice in your ear. And maybe that you also mentioned radio, and then also, I mean, radio had that kind of intimacy. I mean, I don't know that much about American politics, but FDR's radio chats, I remember reading about them, how they were a way that he, kind of brought socialism, or not socialism, but a kind of New Deal public program into people's homes and into people's ears. And this like intimacy of the radio chat was what he used to convince people it was a good idea. And I mean, in a way, the telephone and the radio, I mean, we lost a lot when we moved to visual, because just having the voice, I mean, the voice is so much more seductive than the voice and the image in a way. And then also, I think, like, we're so used to television and cinema where, you can cut away to another location, you can cut from a close-up to a long shot, or you can create intimacy by cutting from a wide shot to a close-up. And then, on Zoom, I can't cut away to India right now. I don't, that would be a very dramatic thing if I could do that on this Zoom call, but it's not reality. So, we have the kind of televisual image without all the magic of, cutting, and, a jump cut is very powerful. Suddenly you're somewhere else and you're, it's closer to a dream state. So we have like a little bit of the, televisual magic, but we don't have access to the full range. And we've lost the intimacy of the telephone and the radio. So I feel it's a little bit, there's one aspect of it that's the worst of both worlds, but there's another aspect of it that's very fascinating. I've been on tour for 20 years now. Like, I can't believe, like, now that I'm not traveling, I cannot believe I took those 1 million airplanes. It seems like a kind of insanity to me, but suddenly all these people I met on tour are popping up, in the Zoom boxes on these Zoom things, and and they've never met each other, and they're all somehow in the same space, and that's another kind of magic that's very sudden and very hard to understand.
I related very much to the moments when you talked about the sort of the adult reality and the weariness of touring, and how is it 20 years ago that I just remember when I first started doing somebody's gonna fly me somewhere, I'm gonna get to do something, and now it's like, oh god. I mean, even without, of course, the giant part of this, which is the environmental degradation, just the spiritual malaise of it. Yeah.
And yet also, I'm so confused about it. I mean, one thing is I feel I've kind of failed to find a real audience for my work here, maybe because I've concentrated so much on having an international audience. So without hearing so many different opinions from different countries on what we're doing, it suddenly feels to me like I have no outside feedback on anything. And I realize how it's strange, because in a way I ignore what everyone says and just do what I want. But in another way, it makes me realize I really listen and kind of put all the opinions on the flow chart or on the spreadsheet, and kind of like try to understand what different people thought about it and why, and how their different perspectives, balance each other out. And with that suddenly vanished overnight, it's really like, oh, it was really an enormous amount of insight into what we're doing that I can't find on my own. It's really fascinating to watch.
Just when you think about that loss, is it the loss of the the varied perspectives, or is it more to do with the local, global, or local foreign split?
I feel on tour, the people who have the confidence to come up to me and say a lot about what they saw are often incredibly brilliant people. I do feel there is like a kind of brilliance that I was being confronted with. I mean, often with people who hated the work, or not people who loved the work, people who hated the work. But I really feel like, wow, those were a lot of insights that I wouldn't have thought of myself. But I don't know exactly why. I mean, I think it's because they have a different context and they see different work, and they're comparing it to different work, and they've read different things than me that in languages I don't read, that haven't been translated. So they're coming to the work with all this other information that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe also because they don't need to like live with me all the time. If they upset me, I get on a plane and go away. So there's this other confidence people have to maybe say something that they might not say to someone in their own community.
Mm-hmm.
But these are all things I'm very suspicious of too, of course, because we need to find the confidence to be more bold and critical with each other in our own communities. We can't only do it when we're far away.
Yeah. Well, it's, yeah, I don't know, what I have in my head is both that the sort of, what I grew up with was that, people would congratulate everyone after a show, and then you go off to your respective bars, and then the eye rolling begins. So there's that, which is not productive. And then there would be, a few people who would not do that, and how refreshing that was. But then also that we're in this funny place where I don't know how much that has changed, but at the same time, the freedom with which people will sound off about personal and local and intimate things, online is fascinating. Which is not, I don't want to talk about cancel culture, but it occurs as an interesting split that we're in. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I feel when I criticize someone's work in my local scene in Montreal, people often take it personally. And on tour, I often feel people criticize my work in a way where I only feel they're talking about the work and don't take it personally in the same way. And I sometimes think that's a little bit of a difference between North America and Europe. That in Europe,
Yes.
maybe there's more of a way to criticize only the work and not feel you're criticizing the person. But then also, yes, when you're not trapped with them in a little micro community, maybe there's more freedom to speak your mind. And then, yes, also online. I mean, people write all sorts of things online that they wouldn't say to your face. It's really fascinating. I don't know what to make of all that.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's true in the various places in Europe where I've been, is that there is something refreshingly different about, in the US, certainly there is this, what we equate being polite with lying often. And that's, that's no good, obviously. But also there's also, alongside of that, there is a sort of performativity of critique in certain European cities that I find equally, I don't know about equally, but it's like, come on. Yeah, yeah. One of the things you said early in the book, and I'm misquoting this, but something about criticism and translation, that you didn't see the relation between the two of them necessarily, and you were talking about in maybe the earliest work you talk about and the split title. Am I getting that right?
Well, there was a kind of game we played in our first show, en français comme en anglais. It's easy to criticize. In both English and French, it's easy to criticize. And the game was translating back and forth from English to French. And in your translation, putting in a criticism of the thing you just translated. Mm-hmm. And for sure, this game was based on, I mean, I'm unilingual. I never managed to learn French, and it's made my life very difficult here in Montreal. And it's not really acceptable not to speak French here, so it always puts me in a position where I'm wrong, which is very similar to like my general position in life, where I feel like I'm always extremely open to the idea that I'm wrong or I might be wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
then, yes, I mean, I also think not speaking French here is just actually wrong. There's no question.
You say that you never managed to learn, but but then at another point, I think in the book, you also say, is that you're questioning? I mean, the book is really the sort of vicissitudes of the unreliable narrator in a certain way.
I mean, I've tried again and again to learn French. I just can't get it. It's so crazy.
So you really try, like, good faith effort.
I think so. But I mean, the fact that I failed so completely makes me feel like, what is it? Why can't I get it? Why can't I learn it? But I mean, I feel I've tried. It's really crazy, really disturbing in my life, especially now that I'm not traveling and I'm stuck here. Yeah. I mean, translation is really, it's so much a part of Montreal life. People are always switching languages and going back and forth between French and English, and always translating each other or helping each other find the word in the other language. And, you lose so much of language is so much a part, like not only what the words mean, but what references you have and what certain ideas, how they resonate for you, or what you connect them back to, or what history you connect them back to. Mm-hmm. So, even if you get the meaning, you might be totally losing what it's about, or what makes it important to the person from the other culture.
Yeah. It makes me, I worked as I worked as a critic, a daily critic, mostly writing about dance, but also theater and live art in general. And I always thought of criticism as translation, and that it was, it's impossible. I mean, that has to be a pleasure, that it's impossible in some way, or it just seems like your would be one sort of, humiliation after another if the failure seemed like a problem.
What parts of it did you find most impossible?
Well, I think that there's no way to adequately translate experience into language. I mean, not just for criticism. That's just it's always interesting to me when people talk about language as being a thing that sort of, often when I'm teaching writing, students maybe don't, I want to say who aren't really practiced writers, but that might not be the case. But anyway, it often will come up, people saying, oh, well, writing is really fixing something to the, like tacking the butterfly to the wall and such. But I've always thought that language is mostly about what it can't do. It's about all of the holes around where it maybe has a moment where it gets at something. And as you say, yes, authenticity is a feeling. So for me to write something as a critic that captures in any way or gets at in any way what happened in some kind of, I don't even want to, not even universal, but a wider way than just my faulty, subjective, biased ideas is not possible. And that should be part of the pleasure of it. And I think it has to be where it starts from, versus that being a limitation or a problem. And it's why the review as the consumer report is so ridiculous. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, failure and the importance of failure is so much a part of my thinking, or of Vatimo's idea of weak thought, as opposed to strong thought, where, it's important to have weak thought. It's so you're open to the flaws in your thinking, and you're not trying to dominate through your thinking or your writing or your words or your rhetoric. But, I mean, as I get older, I also worry that I'm too attached to failure, and that, wanting to fail and then failing is maybe too easy, and there needs to be some sort of tension where you're also trying to succeed, and there's this tension between trying to do something and failing, and knowing you're going to fail but not wanting to fail, that creates the kind of texture and complexity and richness.
Yeah. But what would that even, I mean, I started by saying that I haven't seen your work live, and I did look a little bit online, but I also sort of didn't want to. I wanted to have, I don't know, I hate watching things online. I'm not supposed to say that in this context, but to our 3 viewers, I don't know, what would it even mean, succeeding? Trying to succeed with the type of work.
I don't know. I mean, if I think of my books, like, I've published 6 books. I've now finished number 7, but it's not out yet. And of those 6 books, I've written 1 book that people really, really like, Polyamorous Love Song, and 5 books that people, like, but not as much. And there's something about how much more people like Polyamorous Love Song than all of my other books put together that I find so disturbing. And then also, I mean, you fucking shouldn't complain about that. I mean, thank God you wrote something people like. I think a little bit like, Lou Reed with Walk on the Wild Side. He had 1 hit song, and he kind of felt pissed off about it his whole life because he put out all these records that were important to him. And that song was produced by David Bowie, and he kind of blamed David Bowie for it being a hit. And, the fact that there's that, 1 hit song that people know more than all of his other work put together, or that mainstream people know, kind of nod on him. Mm-hmm. But like one thing that makes it's not a failure is more people love it. But then, it that makes it a failure in a different way or something.
Right. Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, there's also, right, there's something being a commercial success, or if not even a commercial success, but I don't know, and at least, certainly in the US context, it's so aligned with, if you're not getting bigger, you're dying. We have no ability to, maybe that's something that changes with this, but I doubt it.
And I want to make work that connects with people. I mean, when I'm working, I'm mainly trying to please myself and trying to do something that feels alive to me. Mm-hmm. But my hope is that, if it connects with me, it will also connect with other people. But then when it connects with people too much, maybe I also feel like I haven't bothered them enough, or I haven't challenged them enough. So it's like this, balance of connecting with people, but also being a thorn in their side, and how to do both at the same time.
Right. Well, that also makes me think of is it necessary for somebody to be invested in the same values to what extent do you want to connect with people who share your values or don't? I mean, you talk a lot in the book about, things like an aesthetics of awkwardness or the humiliation in performance and discomfort. And if for somebody, it's not, if live art isn't about those things, then, and you connect with them by creating something that's just incredibly pleasurable for them, then is that a success for them and a failure for you? I mean, you've talked also about works of yours that were incredibly successful, that you've, in a way, I mean, the letter you wrote, my God, the letter you wrote when your the piece was performed by the National
Theater School in Montreal.
Theater School, and just that it, I don't even know what to say about that letter. What would you? Could you give the short version summary of that story?
Yeah, so for their 50th anniversary, the National Theater School did a production that was based on our show, En français comme en anglais, It's Easy to Criticize, and was also based on it had aspects from all time periods and aspects of my work, including like things I wrote on my blog. And it was very disturbing for me to watch because it was like based on my work, but it was, a very mainstream theater version of it, but also for them, with them going as experimental if they could. But for me, it was as mainstream as my work could be stretched. So it's very disturbing for me. And it's true, I mean, when I started, trying to bring being yourself in a performance situation into theater in a more extreme way than I'd seen it before, I mean, I was hoping it would enter the mainstream, and I was hoping it would change theater. And then I'm watching, the National Theater School is the main theater school in Canada. So I'm watching the mainstream version of it, and it's so far away from what I want and what I like and what I hope for. So, I mean, it's a little bit like the expression, be careful what you ask for.
Yes.
I mean, it's so much what I want, and it's so painful for me, and it's not their fault, and it is their fault because, they came so far in my direction, but, nowhere near where I want things to be. It was
that was one of the great lines when you're like, they came so far and wasn't far enough. And the simultaneous pain in that for you, I mean, very real pain, and also the acknowledgement of the ridiculousness of, not being able to compromise, but then also the not being able to compromise is the point of the endeavor, so that it is at once ridiculous and not ridiculous, maybe.
And more people saw that than anything that I've actually done. So it's also like, I meet people all the time and they hear my name and they're like, oh, I saw the thing at the National Theater School. And it's the only thing they know about my work.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do with my work and nothing to do with my work. It's a little bit analogous to when novelists have their novels adapted by Hollywood and they go see the Hollywood version of their novel and it's clearly based on their novel, but, they've changed, so many important things that it no longer has the essence of what they were trying to do. I mean, these are very fascinating dynamics for me. I mean, in a way, they're dynamics between the mainstream and the counterculture, and there's different mainstreams.
Yeah, but then it also relates to, it goes to the heart of the desire to control versus collaboration, and the desire to effect real change and go further than you could alone versus the desire to be an individual voice, and how you talk about both of those things in the book with regards to art and also politics.
Yeah, I mean, compromise has a bad rap in art, maybe. Artists aren't supposed to compromise. But I believe, there can be really brilliant compromises where you can really make something that's like in collaboration that's so much better than what any individual could make.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, how to find the right compromises and how to know when you found them and how to be like open enough to find the right compromises, but not so open that you lose, what's important about what you're trying to do, or you lose what you're fighting for, or you lose the kind of ethics or politics of what you believe in.
One of the things, wow, I'm thinking two things. One is that when I think about collaboration, one of the first memories or images that always enters my head is this collaboration that I was doing with 3 other artists, and a couple of days before the premiere, one of the lead artists just sinking down on the floor of the space and just saying, "This is not a piece that I would make," and just the simultaneous, that was true, and that's the reason to do it, and also like, God, what, what? And then in your book, it's always there's this repeating of this cycle of a few days before the performance or the night of, and you just being like, I don't know what we're doing. What is this? What did we do? And it's like, well, yes, but that's the game.
I mean, one of the things writing the book, Authenticity is a Feeling. Well, yeah. I mean, writing books in general is so much easier than making collaborative performances. I mean, it's amazing to me how difficult I find it to go into this collaborative process. And considering I find it so difficult, it's amazing that I still do it. And that makes me think I must really believe in the possibility of collaboration, even if I don't always like the experience. And I wonder why I believe in it so much and do I believe in it, or do I believe in the idea of it, or what is that belief? And
yeah, or are you enamored of difficulty? I mean, is difficulty what? I don't.
Maybe. I don't feel enamored of it.
Yeah. I was trying to think if that's the case for me, that making something collaborative is always harder than writing something. I'm not sure. I have to think about that one. They're different. They're different difficulties and different pleasures.
Do you have any thoughts on the having this double life that we both have, where we both write things and both work in performance?
Yeah, it strikes me that I started my home base as a writer, and I don't know if you would say your home base is a writer or a performance maker. Although it's shifted, I used to feel very, very strongly that I was a writer and that's all I was, and I have this notebook so that like it protects me from the world. And then I was in a phase of more. Oh, it's interesting to be in performances, but that's more as a found object, and that the balance has evened out a bit more. But certainly, I think performance flows from writing, or the collaborative relationships I have. Anyway, that's not answering your question. But maybe it is in saying that it's less, as time has gone on, it feels less a double existence, and it used to feel incredibly bifurcated. Like I do that and I do that. How is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started writing and making performances basically the same time at the end of the 80s. And I always did them both, maybe in a way like, sometimes I'm going to be around people and sometimes I'm going to be alone. A little bit like the extrovert introvert dynamic. And it's funny, like when I write fiction or even essays, like if I write about real people or real things that happen to me, I transform them as completely as possible because I feel that's the ethical thing to do. And then in Authenticity as a Feeling, I wrote about real people without hiding the fact that it was real people.
Yeah, I was curious how, if there's been
Uh,
fallout, I would think,
there
in certain
hasn't
cases.
really been, I mean, I've had conversations, but everybody's been okay so far with what I
Mhm.
wrote about them. But I'm not okay with it. I feel like, wow, I feel like, when I read, I don't know what year it came out, but when I read Aliens and Anorexia by Chris Kraus and I Love Dick by Chris Kraus, I was so blown away by how she wrote about real people and how mercilessly she wrote about real people. And I thought it was so brave and powerful. And, I'd never seen it done that way, like so directly. It really changed my life and changed my whole idea about what good writing was.
Mhm.
And then when it came time for me to do it, I felt like, no, it's not. I mean, maybe it's also about gender and, there could be something, feminist about writing about problematic men, but being a man writing about things, I felt like the ethics kind of went the other way, went in the other direction. But
Mhm.
wow, I felt like writing about real people is so, so problematic. I mean, I feel there's no real ethics to doing it well. And
Really? You mean in the type of writing you do, or in any situation?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't do it because I mean, I love reading it, but I really feel it's like, because they have no way to respond. I mean, sure they can respond, on their blog or on Facebook, but they can't, go into every bookstore and put their response, slide the response into the page where you wrote about them. So, I mean, but with authenticity as a feeling, they did have a way to respond
Mhm.
because we sent it
Some
to
did,
them.
right.
Yeah,
Or did you
and they
send it
sent
to everyone who
we
was
sent it
mentioned?
to
No.
everyone we worked with as a performer creator. But no, there's
Mhm.
lots of other people I wrote about that we didn't send it to because really I mentioned hundreds and hundreds of people in that book. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, we included a lot of responses from our collaborators in the book itself. But yeah, there's something about it that just feels so confusing to me. I really don't know where the line is and what's okay and what's not okay. And I know now, having done it, I know less than ever.
I think, yeah, I mean, you set up the book so that it doesn't, from the beginning, there's the feeling of, there are other ways that I could be telling this, and there are other people who could tell it, and but that still doesn't allay this concern about,
I mean, it's a little
yeah.
bit like, starting a friendship with someone and saying, I might hurt you in this friendship. Does that make it? But it doesn't make it okay. I mean, in a way, it makes it okay. Is if I say something that hurts you, tell me and I'll listen. And it's true. Anyone I wrote about in the book, if they want to tell me what I did wrong, I'll apologize. But there's still some way where, yeah, real life and literature and real life and art, yeah, it's really fragile.
I think I didn't. It's also, it took me a while to realize the extent to which I did have other people in my work, until certain things happen when you think, oh, it didn't even occur, I wasn't even doing enough work to understand where I was culpable. Um, and, then you learn from that. But then, of course, the text in which you have made that mistake and trespassed in that way is still out there. Yeah.
Yeah, writing all your mistakes are out there in the world for someone to read.
Yeah. There was always it's funny that I'm bringing up criticism so much. I don't really think about it nearly as much these days, but there was always that question of, the critic having the last word and the unfairness of that, the inequity of that power balance. But then in the long term, I feel like it's almost always the artist who has the last word, which of course doesn't help you in the moment of, your show getting shut down, or, your ego being wounded. But history is critics don't do well in history. So most of them.
Yeah, the artists who enter history, critics who wrote badly about them, maybe don't do well, but the artists who don't enter history, no one knows that the critics who wrote badly about them were right.
That's true. Although, like, there are cases, like, if I think of somebody like Clement Greenberg, like, at this point, it's just, I think, well, if he said that, then I probably feel,
yes,
it's a sort of an automatic disagreement. Probably this artist he championed, is not as interesting as the artist he banned.
The broken clock that isn't even right twice a day.
Yes. Speaking of clocks, we're at the 40-minute mark. Should we invite in the questions?
Yeah, for sure.
If there are there questions?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny that we don't know if anyone's watching.
I thought it would be good if we could have the little counter where you could like watch, like, oh, there's 3 people now. There's 2 people.
Hi. No, people are watching. We do have some questions here, so
amazing.
That will be okay. Yeah, thank you for so far. It's been very interesting. I've been laughing my head off here at some things because I really recognize also the generational feeling in it, what has happened in the last 20 years. I mean, I think we pretty much are the same generation. We shared this travel when contemporary performance arts became international and we started, connecting. I don't remember when, Jacob, we met first time, but it's quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And then you visited my when I had left, I think, Kiasma already, you were there for the Urban Festival. And so, we go way back, so I really enjoyed the talk. And there is some audience questions. I'm just going to jump right into them because we have asked them to be there, so I think it's fair that they get to pose the questions. There's one question which goes to the very beginning of the talk, and it says, at the beginning you spoke about the 4th wall. A Zoom talk can be seen as an intimate conversation between you two, but on the other side you are also talking to me. Would you say there is something like a 4th wall in digital times?
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? It's, I mean, in this Zoom call, we don't have all the other little boxes with all the other faces in it, but I've certainly been in Zoom performances where you have the audience there with you and they use the raise hand feature, and then, somebody put them in the spotlight and they ask their question in the middle of your talk. So there's different ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it does really, there is something about all this Zoom that we're having in the pandemic that really reminds me of theater. It really does seem like Zoom is theater in and of itself. Yes. And in a way that's really fascinating.
What do you think, Claudia? We are learning how to perform to this through this media.
Well, it did make me think. I was quite. I was nervous prior to that as this just started, and I had this sort of sense of the artificiality of it. And on the one hand, I think I'd had this sort of fantasy of like, oh, I just get to have a conversation with Jacob, and that's great. But of course, that isn't what this is at all. Although it also is, and that to me indicates yes that there is this invisible wall, or I don't know if the 4th wall is. I don't know if that is the thing that makes sense, but it is a relationship between principles and then between sort of maybe, concentric circles. One of the, it seems like when I've been talking to friends and colleagues, that there are people who are there are roughly 2 camps, which obviously shift the longer this goes on, but one of the people who are very eager to use this moment to connect with people and to, take advantage of as much of what's happening as possible, and then others who really want to just retreat and be in a very small local space. And I think I'm definitely the latter. And so it's possible that I'm just not aware of the ways in which this is happening, but it seems to me that a lot of what the rush to online has shown are just the same ways in which our field does not move on. We still sort of have the poster of the show saying, this is great, you should come to it. And now we're saying that, there's no poster of the show, there's the, Zoom approximation of the show. So we're going to get it as close as possible to the thing that is great that you should come see. And wondering what other models there might be, but and having no sense of what they would. Yeah.
We as a festival, we took the decision not to have any live streamed performances, and wanted to investigate the situation, experiment with it in other means than trying to simulate that live performance feeling, which at least in March, where we started talking, felt like we will never succeed. This would be a total failure. And looking at how people were struggling to do that and trying to reach out for the audiences the best they could, very early on we came to the conclusion that at least now we just don't know how to do it. But I have to say we are learning all the time, and the best things that we have learned from the artists, that's for sure. And some of the examples are with us in the festival, some of the audio choreographies which feel very, very intimate. So I wonder about this fourth wall question, because somehow there is possibility for a certain intimacy here. As you said, just with the audio, with the voice, and also it's this frontal that we are really facing each other. And it's interesting how people are setting up, staging themselves when they come online, and how that differs, and how much you want to show your private space. We have artists who totally don't want to show any of their private space because they feel that's their home, and they don't want all of this world to intrude into their private space. So there's a lot of big questions coming up, which we are only maybe learning to even formulate as we go along. So it's a big learning curve. At least here we are learning a lot every day about this. There was also the question about craving for real performances and real encounters. Are you craving, are you missing that part, or are you for the time being happy where you are and how things are?
I went to an outdoor concert on Saturday night, 2 nights ago, and it was the first time I'd seen live music since February. It was a fundraiser for Beirut. So it was a lot of Lebanese music. It was very beautiful. It was incredible to see live music again. It was really moving. And it was outside, so it felt relatively safe. But also, the audience was really shoulder to shoulder. And, there were some people wearing masks and some people not. And I was really also is this safe? I don't know how to feel about it. It's amazing to see this music. The music's incredible. Also, it was very moving. There were a lot of speeches about Beirut and Lebanon, and I was crying, and the people beside me were crying. So it was so moving and incredible. And then also I was feeling like, are we putting ourselves in danger by doing this? It was such a confusing feeling. I don't know what I felt. I felt everything at once.
Yeah. I don't think... I am mostly not missing... well, I haven't been missing performing or presenting or reading or those sorts of things, but I think that's... I was in Australia in March, and really I was I was joking for a while, that the last time I left my house, I was in Australia with all of this, and it was sort of the case. For a while, it wasn't actually a joke, and so I felt, and it was a really beautiful experience, and performing and presenting work and seeing work in 2 cities and teaching, and so I just got a big dose of what that is, and I also have been just feeling burnt out for a while, so the enforced quiet time is not so bad, but I don't know, there is something about just paying attention. I mean, it's hard to talk about these things without sounding incredibly cliched, but the paying attention to what is in one's immediate surroundings, and the little things becoming bigger and bigger, is such a beautiful thing, and I'm in a place of incredible luxury where I have cheap rent. I so far can pay the bills that I'm able to have this time. So I'm aware of having a very luxurious, quiet period that is not, is very different from how some people are dealing with and what people are having to do with.
We had a live
and also
performance.
My partner's a musician, and I hear him play, and so that
So you have your private concert going on there. Yeah, we had a performance in a public space during the weekend, and entering that space which was clearly marked how you were supposed to hold the distance to each other, but just the kind of collectivity that you felt when people started coming into that space was overwhelming. And it was maybe all those confusing feelings that, Jacob, you were talking about, like everything just kind of fell on you, like, oh my God. And it speaks of so many different things. And it, of course, speaks of the need, but and the kind of fear. And it was, I met some artists there, and some of them were very concerned because they feel paralyzed, that they cannot create at this time, that, because there's no access. And I'm talking about choreographers or dancers who probably need a little space to move around and practice. And I became extremely concerned because we could move the audience, because this was an audience participation piece by Ligna. You could move the audience, but then the dancers who were sitting at the side, the kind of loss that they are feeling, and the sadness in it was quite overwhelming, I must say. It's this is really hard to know how. It's hard to even know how you feel yourself when you go into there before you actually go, and then you're like, oh, like we just want to cry. And then you want to take it in, and then you look up at the sky like they ask you to look, and you observe all of the things, Claudia, that you were mentioning. This is a lot of the participatory pieces are like that now, because they are trying to make it happen in a proximity of the participants, whether they are home or in a public space with certain isolation rules.
Mm-hmm. It's a very, very different realm in performance than I have ever been in, but when I think of my friends who are in ballet companies, or thinking about symphonies and people whose work maybe particularly in ballet, because it's such a short career already, and it depends so much on scale, and that's very painful. I don't know I can't quite imagine what that would be like. It's all gone.
We have one more question that I have here. I think we have some time still left. And it is, how do you know when you have delivered an authentic performance? So I think this goes to Jacob, but I'm sure, Claudia, you can also answer this if you want to. So how do you know when you have delivered an authentic performance? Or is it just the feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really don't know. And I almost feel it's important that I don't know. I mean, I feel if I have this feeling that, you know, I did it and it was great and it was authentic, it probably means I fucked it up and it wasn't the right thing to do. I mean, I feel it's this like state of not knowing and being unsure and being open to things happening I don't expect. But I do listen to the audience, and for sure, very often people tell me that this feeling that I claim that we're trying to get, where we're all in a room together and something's really happening now. I mean, people do very often say they do have this feeling in our work. So it's not that somebody telling me that means it's true. I don't believe that. But for sure, the fact that people say those sorts of things makes me feel, you know, we must be in this right, you know, realm and the right world. And what we're aiming for is, you know, on the table and in the room with us. But there's no perfect way to do it. It's, you know, it's based on awkwardness. It's based on being unsure. It's based on trying to be open to things that might go wrong. So, you know, there's no right way for something to go wrong. If it's going wrong, it has to go wrong. So, you know, it's being open to this, you know, reality and this not knowing what's going to happen. And you never know for sure that you're doing it.
And it's also responsive, right? It's what makes this such a different thing, is that there's no way to know if, you know, in a talk in a room, you would get a sense of, maybe it would be the wrong sense and you'd be misunderstanding, but of people's engagement and, you know, laughter, and when people start looking at their phones and even less obvious cues. You know, I think about one of the questions I had for you is why, you know, why your work, or to what extent you've ever considered, you know, pure improvisation as a way to go, because it's so related to so many of the things you're talking about, and most of my performance these days is just free improvisation. And yeah, when it's the moments when it seems to be going well and succeeding, and I don't know what that means and if that's true, I lose those moments. It's just like being in some kind of pleasantly drunk state or something. And the moments when I'm failing, boy, I'm there. I'm present. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a critique of pure improvisation where it's like you fall back on things you know, or there's like unspoken rules to it. You know, there's like I think it's a Gavin Bryars quote where he said, when you're doing free improv, you're not supposed to start playing the Star Spangled Banner. You know, there's like unspoken rules. And so I guess my preference is to have the rules spoken. And therefore it's like, it's always a balance between structure and openness. And what the structure is very clear to the audience. And when the structure breaks or cracks, then becomes equally clear. But yeah, maybe it's also, yeah, there's something about the 60s and free improv, or the 60s. And it's like, I mean, there's so much about the 60s that is, you know, so important to me and so foundational and blows me away. But if something I'm doing reminds me too much of the 60s, I feel I need to be, you know, thinking about it more.
I think you might get in trouble, yeah.
Yeah. So that's also been you know, and it has to do with, you know, the year I was born and being Generation X and, you know, a very unfair critique that the hippies became yuppies. And, you know, trying to do something that, you know, stays confusing forever and isn't confusing when you're young and then becomes conservative when you're old, which I think is, you know, have to do with the transparency around what the rules are and a transparency around what the structure is.
Yes,
Maybe one more question.
Improvisation is great.
And it's about music. because, and this I know even from the performance that we were supposed to deliver, to show here now, that music plays a big part in it. So it's kind of like a dialogue between the music and the reading of the book and performing it live. So music has always been, I guess, do you think that's a Generation X thing, or is it just personally something that really relates to, and how does it relate to your writing? It's obviously there when you are performing and your performances, but how is that related to your writing?
Yeah, music is so important to me. I mean, I guess to a lot of people or most people, music just hits my emotions more directly than anything else in life. I mean, more than my friendships, more than like real things that are, it just gets to me so directly in a way that, I don't even have language for. And I don't even know what music I like anymore, but I know that music is like just so important to me in a way that transcends anything about like writing or performing or making music. I don't know. It's almost like a religion, and I'm against religion, but yeah, it really gets to me. So it's almost like anything I say about it, limits how much power it has over me. It has a kind of power over me that is just like is almost like an insanity. So yeah, whenever there's music, I'm kind of, I'm not myself, and that not being myself is actually, one of the best things that can happen to you.
Is there one thing over another for you, Claudia? I mean, you're writing and performing, and you're involved in poetry and fiction writing. Is one thing, does anything hit you like music hits, Jacob?
I don't know if I would say one genre or mode does. I think it's more thinking of particular performers or writers. I've been on a Ursula K. Le Guin kick of late, and she is absolutely a writer who does that for me. That I just, it sweeps me up in a way that is beyond words and the intellect, and it's made of words, so that's beautiful. And then there is a way of making for myself. There's something about being in the middle of that making process that I think can be similar, whether it's working with musicians or working on my own, when it really feels like you've passed a place where it's about good or bad. It's just a thing that is happening. So I guess the short answer, having started to give you the long, rambly, incoherent answer, the short answer is no.
Okay. I think we are reaching the time limit with our discussion today. It was so great to have both of you. What a great discussion. I really enjoyed it from the beginning to the end. As I said, to our audience, the books are at the library downstairs. So please, anytime between 4 and 10, come over, take a look, and you can go into the garden, take a deck chair, and enjoy the reading. So thank you so much. Also, there's a little piece of Jacob's book in our magazine. So those who cannot make it all the way here, you can go online. We have a printed version here, which you can get if you come to the venue or some of the other venues around Berlin. It's available as printed, but it's also online, and there is one version in German and one version in English. So it should reach out at least people who speak those two languages. I hear you, Jacob. I don't seem to be able to learn German, and we'll discuss that another day. It's impossible. I don't know what it is, but I guess we can talk about this psychological block that we have for learning a language. So thank you so much for tonight, and wish to see you live at some point. And Jacob, if this was now the end of your performance, what would be the last song that you would put on?
I don't know. I've been listening to this record by Damon Locke's Black Monument. It's just an incredible record. I listen to it every day now. So probably that record.
So maybe our audience can now go online and try to find it, Black Monument, as the ending song for this evening. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again. Till then, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.